Hello everybody, welcome to the Isaiah Maynard Show. The topic of today's video is something that I think is very important in our culture today. However, before I get into it, I want to make one thing very clear. I do not condone, support, or promote violence against anyone who is gender dysphoric. The place I'm coming from is a place of compassion, and I do not want my words to be misconstrued as supporting violence or supporting cruelty toward people who are gender dysphoric. Now, with that being said, transgender ideology is incoherent, it's manipulative, and it's a predatory ideology that's infected the minds of many today. Many people still believe it, despite the fact that it's impossible to make a sound argument in support of the left's gender ideology. And this becomes increasingly clear whenever you watch the documentary by Matt Walsh, What is a Woman?, where he goes and asks so-called gender experts, people who involve themselves in this subject every day, real questions on the subject matter. Asking them, what is a woman? What is the difference between sex and gender? Asking them other basic questions that they should be able to answer because they write whole papers about it or they're big proponents of the ideology. However, despite this, they can't answer many of these questions. They give nonsensical claims, answers that don't make any sense, or they just get angry because Matt Walsh is daring to ask real questions, daring to challenge them on their ideas. Moreover, if you ask real people just out on the streets about their views on this issue, if they're more on the left and have adopted this ideology, they're going to be giving answers that are coming from a place of confusion or fear, fearful that they're going to be labeled a transphobe or a bigot, and confused because they themselves don't understand the ideology. Now, today's video will lay out a simple case that will go against transgender ideology. It will not be comprehensive by any means. However, it will be a basic explanation as to why I think we need to reject this social movement completely. I will start by laying out some essential basic truths. Then I'll talk about why we should not be inflicting this ideology on children, and lastly, I'll comment on transgender adults. So all that and more today on the Isaiah Maynard Show. Men and women are fundamentally different. There are often differences in athleticism, temperament, bone density, height, mentality, body shape, hair growth, and even down to the chromosomes that are the blueprints for our body. Yet despite these facts, you go throughout life and you may often hear that men and women are basically the same, and that gender roles and the differences between the sexes are merely social constructs arbitrarily designed to create inequality. However, if that's true, then why for thousands of years have men and women behaved differently? Why have they preferred different roles and fulfilled different duties in society? Why are women better at some things than men and men better at other things? These traditions and these facts and many more are all called into question whenever you challenge the differences between the sexes. And the burden of proof falls onto those challenging it. What evidence do they provide in order to contradict these basic traditions and facts that we've accepted for thousands of years? What evidence do they have? What arguments do they make? Ultimately, nothing. Nothing but nonsense, reliance on subjective feelings and how they wish reality truly operated. This is because sex is not something you can choose. Sex is not arbitrary and it is not on a spectrum. Sex is inherent, it's concrete. It's an objective truth about you. It's a fundamental characteristic of your nature, and it's because of this that you can not change it, ever. It's a part of what defines who you are, and denying that will only lead you astray. You need to come to accept that if you wish to live a fulfilling life. The ideology itself is incoherent, and is targeting our children now. If we just take a look at the ideology itself, and its effect on people, we have numerous detransitioners coming forward now with their tragic experiences and suing gender-affirming pediatricians like Dr. Michelle Forcier. We are setting children up for horrors like this based on an ideology that can't even define what a woman is, nor man, nor how men can become women or vice versa. Moreover, just setting that aside, if we accept the ideology at face value, then at least when it comes to children, we can all accept that we shouldn't be forcing this upon them. I mean, how can we trust children, the same children who believe in Santa Claus and other fantastical ideas, to choose their sex, to understand what decision they're making at such a young age. We can't. I mean, hell, they can't even consent to things like buying alcohol or getting a tattoo or buying and owning a firearm or buying a lotto ticket. So the whole idea of forcing this on children, of trans children, really just completely falls apart from even the most basic scrutiny. And most of the time, we all know this deep down, that when a trans child is coming out, we all know the parents are the one who impose that ideology on their children in order to win brownie points at their PTA meetings or wherever they work, or if they're a celebrity, just becoming relevant again. So why are we doing this? Why are we forcing this on children? And how is it so pervasive in our culture? The answer to that question is simple. It's a social contagion. It's a deep confusion, and it's likely happening because of something more sinister. Think about it. We can all acknowledge trends emerge among our youth, or even into adulthood. Things like a popular haircut, a way of dressing, some new slang that's going around. These things are trends that just emerge in our society. So understanding and accepting this, how can we actually deny the fact that many young people, especially young women, could possibly be falling prey to this dangerous and perversive ideological trend? Of course we can't deny this. It's everywhere online. I mean, just look around. If it's pushed on social media sites like TikTok, Instagram, and Tumblr, any young boy or girl who's feeling isolated, going through an awkward phase, going through puberty, someone who's confused, isolated, or just feeling different from their peers is vulnerable to being indoctrinated and adopted into this cult. This is why we, as a society, cannot ignore this growing issue, especially when it comes to our children. This reminds me of a question that I get a lot. Why do you care so much? Why can't you just leave people alone? Well, I care because it's harming children, and it's a self-destructive ideology that's leading people astray. And I care when it comes to adults because by affirming people's delusions, we are harming them, not helping them. Just imagine a friend of yours tells you that he's feeling deeply troubled about his body, that he truly feels like he was supposed to be born in a different body, one that's disabled. What is the best thing to do for your friend? Maybe he feels like he isn't supposed to have his right arm or his right leg. Is it to affirm his belief, tell him he should go to a doctor, promote him, and encourage him to go to a doctor to get his arm or leg chopped off? Or is the right thing, the moral thing, the truly compassionate and helpful thing to do for your friend is to help him get counseling and point him in a direction that will help him come to accept himself and his body for what it truly is? This is almost the exact same scenario when it comes to transgender people who are deeply confused or gender dysphoric. Rather than allowing doctors to harm them, to harm deeply confused people, we should be counseling them. We should be helping them come to accept themselves and their body for what it truly is and for who they truly are. And yet, despite this, we don't. We're going the completely opposite direction. This is why I say we must reject this ideology completely, from childhood all the way to adulthood, because it's self-destructive, because we're hurting people, not helping them. It's a completely compassionate thing to do. Even those who disagree with me will point out just how mentally ill and suicidal trans people are, even after they get surgery. The only long-term surgery we have on people who receive these experimental treatments, or surgeries rather, shows that 7 to 10 years after they have these surgeries, many of them are still having suicidal ideation. Many of them are still unhappy with their bodies. Many people on the left will look at that and say, well, it's because of transphobia. It's because they're not being accepted for who they are. However, if you look all around today, it's completely the opposite of the picture that's being painted by those on the left. I mean, there's entire movements supporting people who are so-called trans, so-called the opposite gender, online. There's movements and parades and marches on the streets. There's an entire month and separate weeks dedicated to supporting so-called trans people. So I find it very hard to believe that they're not being accepted and they're not being supported. The truth in the matter is, the reason why many of these people are not living fulfilling lives, are still suicidal, still having many problems with their body is because they haven't come to accept the truth. They've been led astray. They've been adopted into a cult that's telling them lies. The truth of the matter is, they are born with a certain sex, male or female, and that's who they are. And that's a beautiful and wonderful thing, not a bad thing. To conclude, men and women are fundamentally different. Men cannot become women, and women cannot become men. This becomes increasingly obvious whenever you start to criticize the ideology that says otherwise, and the proponents of it. We need to absolutely condemn and reject this ideology entirely, because if we don't reject it from childhood all the way to adulthood, many of the atrocities that doctors are inflicting upon people, and that people are inflicting upon people, adopting them into this cult, will continue to happen. That's all I have to say on this issue today. Thank you so much for watching, and God bless.